In this video, we're going to talk about how to create a lease exit strategy that protects your business. Committing to a lease for a commercial space is a big decision for any business. But just as important as the space you choose is how you plan to leave that space if things change. Whether your business is growing, downsizing, or relocating, having a solid lease exit strategy can save you a lot of headaches and a lot of money. In this video, we're going to discuss the top lease terms that can trap you in your lease longer than you'd like and cost you far more than you expect if not properly negotiated. We'll talk about the critical areas to focus on to make sure that you can exit your lease without penalty and protect your business for future flexibility. Pitfall number 1, the consent to sublease or lease transfer clause. First up is one of the biggest risks for tenants, the consent to sublease or lease transfer clause. If your business acquires another one or gets bought out from another company, merges with another, needs to move, downsize, or shift locations, a sublease or lease transfer might be your best option. However, many leases require landlord approval before you can sublease your space to another company or transfer the lease to a new tenant. Here's the issue. Landlords can often be slow to approve, or they may deny your request altogether, leaving you stuck paying rent for space you no longer occupy. Even worse, some landlords add fees for granting consent or require you to keep paying rent until they find a replacement tenant, even if you're already moved out. To avoid this, negotiate the conditions for securing approval on subleasing or transferring the lease, or at least limit the landlord's ability to reject your request. The more flexible the terms, the better your ability to exit the lease when you need to. Ultimately, you don't want the landlord to unreasonably withhold or delay consent. Typically, landlords want 30 calendar days, that's roughly 1 month, to go through the entire process. But others might want 30 business days. That's the difference between 1 month and 1.5 months. Pitfall number 2. Another key element is the lease termination option. This is the right to terminate your lease early without being held to the full term. But it's often misunderstood or poorly negotiated. Without a termination option, you may find yourself stuck in a lease for the full extent of the term, even if your business needs change or if the space becomes financially unfeasible. Some leases do have termination clauses, but they're usually tied to a hefty fee or penalty that could wipe out any savings you'd get from leaving early. Make sure your lease gives you the ability to exit with as little financial impact as possible. Ideally, with no more than a small upfront penalty fee, maybe 3 months, 6 months, most landlords will want to be made whole again, as if you stayed in place throughout the entire term that you signed. That typically includes the present value of the remaining cash flow outstanding that they would have received throughout the term, plus any unamortized cost of the value for any concessions they gave you or incentives given up front, plus any legal fees or any brokerage commissions that they paid out on your behalf. However, under good market conditions where the landlord thinks they can gain a better replacement tenant at higher rents, they might let you go for a penalty equal to the amount of maybe the months that they feel it would take to find that alternate tenant. That could be 90 days, that could be 3 months. So here's pitfall number 3. Let's talk about the mandatory tenant restoration clause. What's that all about? This is a clause where at the end of your lease, you may be required to return the space to its original condition, even if you had adopted that space as is with the older improvements already having been in place. While that might sound straightforward, the cost of restoring a space can be pretty significant, especially if there's asbestos in the premises or you've made an extraordinary amount of improvements or customized the space to suit your business needs. Some landlords may demand that you cover the cost of demolition or restoration of these changes, even if they're still modern and useful for someone else. Before you sign a lease, make sure you know exactly what the restoration work you'll be required to do. Have the landlord consent to the improvements you construct in your place, free from restoration. Negotiate for a clear, reasonable scope of work, and if possible, try to remove the restoration requirement entirely or limit it to the things you personally changed. If you're stuck with this clause, ask for an allowance from the landlord to help cover the restoration. Pitfall number 4, landlord demolition clause. Another sneaky clause is the landlord demolition provision. In some leases, the landlord has the right to tear down the building given 90 or 100 days notice to you. While this may sound rare, it's more common than you think, especially in areas where property values are rising and the landlord sees an opportunity to redevelop the property or convert its use. If the clause is in your lease, it means you might have to leave before the end of that lease term, under less tenant-friendly market conditions, if the landlord decides to demolish the building. To avoid this, you need to negotiate or limit or remove this clause altogether. Or at the very least, ensure that the landlord provides lots of notice, at least 6 months, and compensation if they choose to exercise that demolition provision. The last thing you want is to have to relocate unexpectedly at your own expense. Here's pitfall number 5. Let's talk about relocation clauses. So we talked about a demolition clause, but what about relocating somewhere else? Some leases include a provision where the landlord can relocate your business to a different space within the building or even to another property of theirs. This could be a huge disruption to your operations, and not to mention the cost of moving, redesigning the space, and reestablishing your business could add up quickly. I have tenants or clients that are in the financial industry, and every time they move, they breach compliance. So for them, this type of relocation is a big disruption to their business. So before signing your lease, be sure to negotiate a clear limitation on the landlord's ability to move you. Ideally, you want this clause removed entirely. But at the very least, make sure there are limits on the timing, costs, and the type of space that they can move you into. It's got to be equal to or better than what you got now. Try to protect your business from being uprooted because that is crucial. Pitfall number 6. Finally, one of the most overlooked and costly pitfalls is the tenant notice of exit requirement. Many leases require tenants to notify the landlord of their intent to leave months or even a year before that lease ends. If you miss this deadline, you could find yourself stuck in the lease for another term automatically, even if you've already moved out, or end up paying between 1.5 to twice the amount of your monthly rent as an overholding penalty. This can be especially problematic for businesses with unpredictable growth or those that can't plan that far ahead. So to protect your business, negotiate a flexible notice period, or at least ensure it's reasonable, no more than 6 months in advance. And make sure that the notification can be sent electronically or by email, not just by formal mail, so you don't risk missing the deadline. In conclusion, a lease exit strategy is all about flexibility and clarity. By focusing on these key points that we just discussed, like sublease and lease transfer rights, termination options, restoration requirements, and relocation clauses, you can ensure that your business has the freedom to adapt as the needs change, without being stuck with any hidden cost or unexpected obligations. And don't forget, working with an experienced commercial real estate advisor can be a game changer too. They'll help you spot these potential pitfalls and negotiate terms that give you peace of mind, knowing you can exit your lease without costly surprises. Thanks for watching. And if you found this video helpful, be sure to like, subscribe for more tips on navigating commercial leases. Until next time.